Hey guys, welcome to MMP Music Mentorship Program. Today I'm going to show you a beginner's approach to mastering. Beginner's approach means that you've worked on your song, you've worked on a mix, and you just want to get this song out there in a way that is loud enough to be commercially viable, and that you can kind of make your final tweaks. So there's not going to be anything fancy other than stock plugins, and I'm specifically using stock plugins or free plugins so that you don't have to go out there and spend a few $100s just to master. You can just do it right out of the box. If you're in Logic, then you're like completely set. Check out some of the things in Logic that would be starting with a compressor. You have this compressor here, and this gives you tons of different options of different kind of flavors of compressors. So that's a great place to start. And then following that, you have saturation plugins. In this case, I'm using Softtube, which is free if you want to download that. That's available. And then, of course, you have your normal EQs. The cool thing about Logic is that the EQs there, you can do a linear phase EQ, which is great for mastering. You can look up what a linear phase EQ does or is. If you want, I'm not going to really go into that, but you definitely would want to check it out for mastering. And then we have a Widener here by Brainworks that's free. It's called BX Solo. And the equivalent to that in Logic would be this here. This is, they call it stereo spread, but basically there's a Widener for the stereo image. And then lastly, we have a limiter here in Pro Tools. I'm using the stock one called Maxim. But in this case here with Logic, you've got your just normal limiter. They also have one called adaptive limiter, which is great. Anyway, if you're in any other DAW, this video will still be relevant because all DAWs have your basic compressor, EQ, and limiter. And then if you want free saturation, there's Softtube and then Widener Brainworks. So our good student, Ashley, has been gracious to share her song with us. This is a song that she created in the course of the few weeks that we have had together as a class. And she's done a fantastic job with this song. And so now we're at the final stages of mastering. And yeah, so I have two versions here. One is her version, which is not limited. That means that it could be through a compressor or something like that, but it's not put through like a limiter like this one here. But over here, we do have one that I put through a limiter. Now, sometimes the client or yourself will send yourself a version of it that has been put through a limiter so that as people are listening to it and evaluating it, they're listening to something that's a little closer to the final product. If that's the case, people have gotten used to that mix, and so I want to have that version. So this is a limited version here of the same song. So as I am working, I want to be able to compare what I'm doing here with all these plugins and different changes to the original version that has been put through a limiter. So when it's green, we're listening to my version. When it's not green, then we're listening to her limited version. So let's go ahead and listen to hers, and you can hear the different sections here of this song.
Well, my friend, 5-hour drive ahead.
So it's a nice mellow song. The sonic spectrum is there already. I don't have to do a lot of crazy things. So I'm going to start working backwards a little bit. I just want to turn this limiter on so I can just get the song a little bit louder. So, okay, so let's go back over to green, which means my mix. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to be looking for a couple things. One, as I go to this loud section here, I'm going to be playing it at its loudest point so I can bring the threshold down. I'm going to be looking at this right over here, the attenuation. I don't want to hit any more than maybe 3 dB, sometimes even 2 if I'm starting to hear it too much. But let's see how loud we can get it without kind of ruining or squashing the sound by bringing this threshold down. Okay, we'll adjust that later, but for now I'm only hitting I only hit once at 2.1, and you can't even really see the meter. So right now I'm just getting it loud enough so that I can start working with it. We'll adjust it later after we do some stuff to it. Here's my compressor. It's the same principle. I don't want to be smashing it at 12 dB. I want to be looking at this meter, making sure that I'm really not hitting above, I don't know, 3. Same thing. The important thing to me here is that with my default setting, I'm going to bring this ratio down to maybe 2:1 or maybe 3:1 at the most, or somewhere in between. I don't want the ratio to be, smashing my mix. The other thing I want to make sure is my attack is late, not early. If it's early, it's going to smash all my transients, which means every time the snare drum hits or the cymbals hit, that it's going to kind of take the life out of it and the attack out of it. I want to leave some room. So later attack, and then release wise, that can adjust depending on the song or how fast it is. But if I don't want too much pumping, if I don't want to hear the pumping, then I'm going to have a little bit of a faster release. I don't typically use a slow release in my master bus compression. So let's keep that release kind of fast. And same thing as before, we're going to watch this meter as I take this level here and bring the threshold down. We're looking for how much attenuation is going on at the loudest part of the song. So let's go back to the loudest part. I think that's about as much as I want. Let me just take it a little further so you can see what happens and what it'll sound like when I start bringing that down too much. Yeah, because it's a stock plugin, I can't get away with compressing too much. So in this case, it's only hitting like 1.5 dB or something like that. Let's add some saturation, see what that does. For free, that's a pretty awesome plugin. If this was like total rock and roll, I'd be boosting it, quite a bit. It depends how much input that you have going into this plugin, of course. So she's got a pretty healthy level here going in. So it's already starting to saturate when I'm at a pretty low level. If you have a low level song, you might have to push it a lot harder to actually start hearing anything. In this case though, I don't want it to be all crazy dirty rock and roll. I want to bring that down and just get some warmth out of it. Okay, this is my blind test. All I do is hit this bypass button a bunch of times till I don't know when it's on or off, and I just close my eyes like this. Okay, now I don't know if it's on or off, and I'm going to hit play and listen to it. Okay, so as you could see, I was clicking it again and again to see which one I liked better with my eyes closed. I didn't know which one is on or off until I opened my eyes, and then I picked the one though that it was on, and I liked that. It just maybe it was a tad bit much, so I'll just barely bring that down. Okay, let's see if we can get some more low end here, and I'll go to like the second verse where that kick drum's hitting in, and this is a low shelf here, so that's going to take everything from here and below and boost that a little bit.
Are you okay there? Riding out the days, waiting on a change to come through. Can you find peace there, ignoring all the pain?
So I like that. One of my concerns is, I don't know if I necessarily trust my room or I trust my speakers. I trust my system. I am not a full-on mastering guy with, $200,000 speakers and a, $100,000 room. So as a precaution, but also to possibly tighten up the low end, I'm going to stick this high-pass filter on and put it at 12 dB. We can do it this way. And then what that means is, look at my wave or my chart here, my frequency chart. It's showing that it's cutting everything below a certain frequency. Now, if this was like a cinematic song or whatever, I might have stuff that's below 30, but in this case, I really want this to be more of a, sound like a analog recording or something that doesn't have like a low sub rumble. And so this can tighten up the mix. Let's see how this sounds.
Are you okay there? Riding out the days, waiting on a change to come through. Can you find peace there, ignoring all the pain?
All right, so let's just cut it from everything below 30 with a 12 dB type cut. And that tightens things up a little bit. So I'm hearing a resonant frequency that I heard earlier when I played this song that I kind of want to address. There's like a low rumble in there that I do want to see if I can get that out. So I'm going to use this band here, make a really kind of narrow band, and then I'm going to search for that frequency just with my mouse as that part of the song plays. So that's where things start going crazy for me, and I want to get rid of that. So I boosted it to find the frequency. Now I'm going to cut it. Typically in mastering, I'm really not cutting more than like 1 to 2 dB. That's because typically when you're cutting more dB, you want to do that in the mix, not in the master. It tends to kind of ruin the mix and take the life out of it if you do too much surgical stuff in mastering. But let's see what we can get away with.
It's now or never. It's now or never. It's now or never.
Seems kind of necessary at that section to do, almost 3 dB. So if I were really going to get into this, I could actually automate that section and only have that EQ start to dip down when that floor tom is hitting. So I want to check this area.
Are you okay there? Riding out the days.
Yeah, it still sounds good over there. So I do hear a frequency in her voice that's like in the probably competing with maybe the bass even, where it's starting to resonate a little too much in the low mids. So let's see if we can address that.
Are you okay there? Riding out the days, waiting on a change to come through. Can ignoring all the pain.
There it is. So same thing. I've just found it. Now I'm going to cut a little bit of it.
Are you okay there? Riding out the day.
So that took care of it. Only 1 dB. Now I want to like kind of compensate for what I did and get a little more warmth out of her voice this way.
Are you okay there? Riding out the day. Waiting on.
Notice that's only also 1 dB, and it's a little bit wider of a band. So typically I have narrower bands when I'm like cutting, and sometimes wider bands when I'm boosting. Not all the time, but in general, that's what I tend to do. Let's see if we can get a little away with a little more sizzle, a little more air.
Are you okay there? Riding out the day. Waiting on a change to come through. Can you find peace there? Ignoring all the pain. Looking for the strength to put.
It looks like after I boosted some of those highs, I kind of wanted some more of these mid highs, which is what, 1.2 or so. If I had another EQ, which I could easily just stick on there, I would maybe go back to that other mid frequency, boost that a little bit. But we're close enough now for kind of this beginner's video. We're not going to get too crazy, but that's just generally some EQs. But depending on the song, that's going to completely change. Could be the complete opposite. So the main thing is that I'm using my ears and instead of my eyes to EQ that section. Okay, so the next stage I'm going to go to a Widener. So I'll bypass this. Check out what this does during this section.
Okay there, riding out the day, waiting on a change to come through. Can you?
So obviously that's crazy, and you want to be very careful with Wideners because they can get phasey. So if you are wondering, is my mix maybe phasing, check it in mono. So if you have a mono listening environment, like a button on your, I have got a button on my speaker controller that can listen in mono. That's always helpful just to double check myself and then bypass this on and off to make sure that it's not sounding weird after I widen it. So anyway, that's kind of cool. BX does a great job of a free plugin. It seems like for me, that first notch is just fine. It widens it a little, but it doesn't lose kind of that center that I want to make sure I have because of the bass, the kick, and the vocal. So now I'm going to go back to the loudest section again and see, because you know all these adjustments have changed my levels. So now this attenuation is probably different than it used to be. So I'll reset that and hit play. So who knows, I'm probably hitting 1.5 to 2 dB of attenuation on this last limiter. My ceiling's at minus 0.1. Now, to double check myself, I want to hear the difference between my new mix or my new master and her original limited version. So remember when I hit option K, that is showing green is mine and not green is hers.
Are you okay there? Riding out the day, waiting on a change to come through. Can you find peace there? Ignoring all the.
Cool. So there are some things that I like about her mix and some things about my mix that I like. I like the fact that my mix kind of is a little more clear, that it has a little more depth to it on the low end, and I also really like the width that I have on my mix. It seems a little more, has like I don't know, a crispness to it. But on the flip side, I do miss some of the mids that she has, and her mix is very centered. So I want to possibly learn from her mix and incorporate some of those things in mine if I were to continue working on this song. But anyway, this is kind of a general setup. All of this is free, especially if you have Logic. All these plugins are available to you. So if this isn't enough for you, then we're going to go into depth using this same song, using other third-party plugins and some more advanced techniques. Thanks for joining us.